Hello and welcome to our session on building successful biotech startups. My name is Rainbow Lowe. I lead the expertise at Hello Tomorrow, which means I'm in a very privileged position to assess the trends in deep tech. But this panel is something that's very close to my heart as someone who has been in academia and then moved to the private sector and spent almost a decade's worth trying to get innovation from the lab into the market. Now we're joined by three of our experts today, and I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. So Tõnu, would you like to go and start?
Yes, hello. My name is Tõnu, Esko. I come from Estonia, and I also have a diverse background, being both a professor of genetics, being 20 years senior manager for Estonian Biobank, a big data collection that is a cradle for biotech innovation, and now holding a hat as a vice rector in university and responsible for innovation, and being an angel investor and a venture partner in a VC fund. So a diverse experience, and I hope we have an interesting discussion into the topic.
Fantastic. Stephanie?
Hello, I'm Stephanie Marrus. I run the Entrepreneurship program at the University of California, San Francisco, which is known as UCSF. Before I did that, I was in the private sector for my entire career, having management roles in biotech companies, early stage and later stage and public, and did deals and all kinds of interesting activities in the commercial world. So I came into the university with a pure commercial mindset. I have an MBA. I do not have a PhD or an MD or an MD PhD like all my colleagues at UCSF do. But what I bring to UCSF is this commercial orientation to what it takes to build a biotech company.
Fantastic. Christian?
Great. Hi. I always start by introducing myself by saying I'm not limited by knowledge, which is a polite way of saying I don't have that much knowledge. So what I'll bring is a lot of practical know-how and background. I was a consultant, then I went into corporate, became an entrepreneur, sold 2 companies, one in Singapore and one in Zurich. I think success criteria for the first sale was I didn't go to jail. And the second one was, for a short moment, the largest exit in Europe. So what I've always said from a takeaway from those 2 things is I'm not always sure what made the second deal better than the first and what I did different. The only thing I can tell you is there's no straight line from A to B in growing a company. So that's my background. I went into the dark side. I'm now a partner at a US firm called ACME. ACME Capital, we have 1.5 billion under management. Our most recent fund is $300 million, and we do early stage deals.
Fantastic. Thank you for the introductions. Now, before we get started into the main part of the discussion, I think it's really important to define what we really mean by biotechnology. Even throughout the summit and yesterday, a lot of people were thinking biotech was pharma and life sciences, and that is correct to some extent, but then would be missing out on a lot of other areas that is very useful. So biotechnology applied to industry, to reducing our carbon dioxide emissions, for extracting critical resources from waste. Honestly, biotechnology touches every single sector and industry, and that is something where, there is beauty in innovation. And there's a lot of value in this space. Now, today, we are joined by 3 of our incredible experts who have a range of biotech expertise, both in the medtech and in the pharma sector, also from the academic side, and also from the venture side as well. So I'm going to go straight into it and ask you guys, how does the investment journey of a biotech startup differ from traditional venture capital?
Well, I'll start, and everyone's looking at me. So what's a biotech startup like? We start with an idea. hopefully we have validated it in the market before we actually put any serious effort into it. And I'll come back to that, I'm sure, later in the discussion. But it's, you know, it's a long pathway. It's going to be a very long path until you get to an actual product. So we don't really think that much about how are we going to sell the product or what are the revenues from the product going to be, because it's just too distant and too many turns in that pathway. But what we think about is how can we prove the concept? How can we show investors that we have not just really interesting science, but we have something that's going to work, that can meet some milestones, and there's a business model around it. So how is that different than normal venture capital? Well, if you're doing a tech company, you can create a product right away. You can sit in your dorm room and code, or build a large language model. That's probably more than a dorm room. But you can actually get real results, real product pretty quickly. And so there's not a question of, is this going to be a product and how is it investable? So we're really very different worlds and different dynamics.
Fantastic. Christian?
So the way I think of this is bio is the new thing. It's going to eat the world. Like someone said, software is going to eat the world 20 years ago. I think it's bio that's going to eat the world the next 20 years. And I think that's the starting point. I also think there's another perspective of this is relatively simple. It's super hard, it's super complicated, but at the end of the day, it's deep tech and it's scaling. And we've been through that. We did that in semicon days. We're going to do that in many other ways. But there's going to be steel, there's going to be dollars, and there's going to be deep IP in it. And with those three combinations, then you can build a business, right? And the business is not hard. It's really simple, right? You need demand, you need a strain that works and is robust, and then you need scale. Then you have a business. It's as simple as that. And sometimes I think when we take through like these synth bio and biology things, we make much harder to build as a company. We terrify founders of starting it because it is as simple as this.
I almost agree, but I think the difference in biotech, either we take the medical side or the synth bio side, or why not even we can add in here like the digital health side, is that the pivoting from the first idea is extremely difficult or almost impossible, because it all has to, it's heavily regulated. So in order to get to the market, get to the client, you need to get a certain set of regulations approved. You have to demonstrate clinical relevance. You have to demonstrate environmental relevance. That means that actually pivoting from your idea is extremely difficult. And also you actually have to have in place your strategy, how you build your product, what kind of milestones you need to meet in order to unlock the next financing or unlock next collaboration. And that's not really there for almost any other deep tech that has been discussed on this floor. So I think that's the key difference. You have to meet the regulations, get certifications, on top of all the other difficulty that developing a deep tech startup is.
I would love to tease apart that last bit, but before we go into the milestones and tangible steps that investors need to look out for, even funding and things like that, let's bring it back to the beginning. One of the key things for biotech startups is how can you show that you can commercialize your product when you haven't either got a product or things haven't quite worked out? Like, what are the steps that you need to take to even show that your product works, and then show that it can work in a real life application, etc.?
Maybe I start, because I'm the representing partially the academia, meaning that all the deep tech starts in academia because it's research heavy. So I think the first thing is you have to have a clear path how you get IP out from the university. You have an agreement, how you get IP, you license it. or you somehow convince the university to invest the IP into you, as we have done in Estonia with our university investment body investing into intellectual property. But also what I think is extremely important is to validate, as was already mentioned, validate that the idea works. And now how you in an academic setting can validate this idea. For example, if you take the medical side, then you usually have to have access to, I don't know, large set of digital data to validate it, or large set of biological data to validate it. Otherwise, you are developing it in applied. So there, again, maybe talking from the Estonian perspective, it's really important or helpful that we have the data digitalized, we have the big biobank to actually build the biological hypothesis to then move into the preclinical work, clinical work. So I think those are the major key things. Have the IP right and have somehow the pre-business development product validation in place. But you can always, argue with this.
Yeah, so I agree, however. No, I do agree. In terms of the IP, I think for Europe, biotech is becoming a critical infrastructure. It's as simple as that, right? And that means some of the red tape needs to go. And I think we all have a responsibility for this. And one of the things I observe as an investor, it's really hard to help early stage biotech companies start. Because like IP taken out of university, you have like 17 different rules, 17 different ways. There's no certainty. You just mentioned that like you invented a way where it's the same thing every time, and I can predict what happens to an investor. I think simple things like that, enabling companies to become independent. Like universities are very often funded by public. And as such, it should benefit the public. I get that, but on the other hand, it doesn't help anyone if it gets stuck in a lab somewhere. Yeah. It never becomes a company, right? And I think that's the fundamental. How do we get the IP and the knowledge into a real life situation?
Yeah.
I'm going to take this a slightly different way. So when you're a startup biotech, you don't really think about what is your product going to be in 10 or 15 years, that's how long it's going to take you to get through clinical trials and everything you need. What you think about is, how can I show proof of concept that's going to get investors interested, so they're going to fund me so that I can get into clinical trials, and then I can do an exit through a partnership with a pharmaceutical company. So it's a very different pathway, and it's not focused on the end game, which is to get the beneficial drug to consumers. Hopefully that's what your partner is going to do, because you're just a little biotech. You can't really build a sales force and get the distribution and all those things 10 years down the road after you've spent a couple of $100 million to go through clinical trials. So the focus in an early stage biotech is, how do I get to enough proof of concept to reduce the risk for investors so that they will enable me to get to the next stage, to dress up my future product and make it appealing to a pharma who's going to partner with me and take it all the way.
Yeah. And I want to follow on your point, Stephanie, because you were saying, like, what are the steps that I need to do to make it attractable in terms of investment? So there's sort of two areas that you can sort of focus on for the audience. The first one being, if you're a biotech startup, what exactly are the main categories, the parameters, the things that you really need to have to get to that next stage of investments? And I think also for the investors in the audience, what do you need to look out for when you're investing for a biotech startup? And having the idea of, going from very early stage to further rounds of funding and having that sort of distinction, I think would be really, really useful.
I think with the biotech, again, somewhat different thing is that the next funding rounds come in where you don't even have a product and you don't have any sales, And you can even go into the M&A without actually having any products or having any sales. And that actually makes it very different again from other deep tech, and there you really have to understand what are the, as you said, milestones that trigger or enable to rise the next round of funding. So in the pre-seed, probably what is required that you have a nice IP, you have somewhat nice agreement with the university, and you have a lab to actually test the idea. And then you go into the seed, then you already have to have the scalability kind of validated. You have to demonstrate that the industrial partners are interested, engage in proof of concept experiments. Then of course, the next phase, it's the question like, do I need to invest whatever 15 million into some silly metal tank to really produce it, or you use some other idea? So I think those are and usually in my experience and from the pharmaceutical side, what helps is that if there is a person in the team who has been there and done that, because it's a very clear and simple playbook that you have to follow in order to unlock the next phases of funding. Because otherwise you may have an excellent idea, you may have the best patents, you may even have the best team, but you just cannot raise the next funds to actually build it further.
Yeah, I agree. First, and probably on a side note, I think one of the biggest mistakes founders make early stage is they want to build their own lab. They want to invest in something that is out there already, right? And you see that going through the seed, going through the pre-seed, then they raise a handful of dollars, and suddenly they're spending 80% of that raise on building a stupid lab somewhere, right? And it's probably available next door at the university, or it's probably available at someone else. So it's about being smart as a founder when you start this and spend the money where you can. And that takes you into when, for a biotech company, I agree, pharma is somewhat different, but it's similar what you're looking at, right? So you go through your usual seed where you prove the strain probably works, you start to show it in a lab, and then you move between seed and A, and that's where you actually show there's a likelihood of you being able to scale it. You can't really scale it, you haven't shown that because it needs probably $50 or $100 million to build that plant, but you need to show that you can scale it. And then you need to show, prove, you have some kind of commercial traction. And in this, that's the first of a kind, where how do you show something that hasn't existed before? And quite often what you do is you replace an existing chemical or something else that's out there, right? So the incumbents are looking at it and saying, well, sure, I'm going to replace it if it's better and cheaper. If it's similar, I'm not interested, right? And you can have as many arguments as you want. So the only thing you can focus on is optimally get an offtake agreement. Not a letter of intent, not all of these soft things. Get an offtake agreement with someone, preferably be a larger company that says, what I've seen in your lab you can build, what I've seen you can do in very small scale. If you can do this in volume, and I mean volume, not just hundreds of liters, mega volume, tons, then I'm going to take that from you. And I'm going to guarantee you a volume for a long time, right? So it's a written commitment, it's a contract. And that's the starting point where you actually start to build a company and can start to finance it. What is interesting, when we continue this, is a lot of my portfolio companies are now hiring a new breed. It's no longer the CFO that comes in once they start to raise the real money. It's a project finance experience that they bring in. And remember that as a founder. I guarantee you, having someone going through project finance, it gives you a completely different profile towards the investors that you're going to talk to soon. Because some of them look like me, have white tennis shoes, and try to kind of dress a little bit young, fine. Most of them are going to look like bankers, really, really boring, bad suits and everything. They're not going to be like what you've seen before. And they're going to look at this as what's my return of investment? They're not looking for a 10x return, not interested, that scares them, right? They're looking for a safe, stable return. And that's what you can give them very soon if you have an offtake agreement with a renowned name, and you start to show, listen, I can build this and I can show the steps I go towards. And that's really like how you build a large biotech company nowadays.
Yeah. I'd like to also loop in Stephanie for her view on this, because clearly I feel like there's a lot of parallel between the medical biotech sector as well as the industrial biotech. Of course, with medical biotech, it's a little bit different in terms of first you need to go through, depending on what the product is, if it's to go through clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, etc. I'm assuming that, in your line of work, you see a lot of great technologies that can go into the market, but they're sort of missing a little bit of something. Could you elaborate on that aspect as well?
Gee, I was going to answer your question from before, but let me see if I can try this one. I mean, we have fabulous science. We have 7 Nobel laureates at UCSF, and so we have world-class science in many different fields. I take for granted that the science is good. We publish in Nature and Science and all the things that matter. The place that we're missing is we don't understand business. My community is all scientific researchers and clinicians. We have a hospital system. And they were never exposed to business. Sometimes I'm the first business person they've ever met, which is just amazing to me. But I get it, okay? I don't know what to do in a lab. I don't know how to pipette or anything useful. So the value that we can bring is teaching them what is it that the business wants to see from your startup. And that's where they make this huge mistake. It's like, I've got great science. I've got world-class science. Everyone's going to want it. Someone's going to hand me a check of $30 million or $100 million or $5 million, whatever it is. And they miss that they don't have a business case, a business model. They don't know that they have a business opportunity, that there's a real need for what they're doing, and somebody's going to pay for it, some product market fit. And so that's what we can bring to them. And it's really no different whether you're doing a medical device or a diagnostic or a digital health AI application or a therapeutic. You have to understand what the need is out there before, and then build the company if there is a need and you find the market, build it around that, and bring in a team that's going to be able to move it forward regardless of what the barriers are, because the second you go and progress in your plan, it falls apart because of something you didn't understand. The team is essential in putting it back on track. Mm. Did I answer anything you wanted to know?
It was everything's perfect. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit on the digital side as well. Coming from the most digitally enabled society in the world, is like, the biotech is not always, the big tanks or, the medicines. But, the biotech these days is very, very often, enabled by AI, and then, linking the AI with, very big biological data sets, being it, the genetic profiles, proteomics profiles, metabolomics profiles, or, digital, like electronic health records, and the best if everything combined. And then you actually take the AI, all those data layers, and there you actually start to do this tech bio, where you actually build the new molecules or new hypotheses based on those deep understanding of the biology. And the similar thing is with digital therapeutics. It's like it's a little bit deviation from this topic. It's still this tech bio side of things where we are learning from the biology, and then we are building the products. Just I wanted to highlight that it's not always the tanks and trucks, but it can also be this tech bio side. We are kind of reversing the table and enable things that have not been possible maybe even last year. It's really revolutionary time.
Completely agree, and no however there, completely agree. I think what we're going through is a moment where there are gigantic industries that are being transformed right now, and they don't know it, right? They're not seeing it, and it's hitting them hard, right? And what I as an investor are seeing, and which you're also coming from, right? You have synthetic bio, you have robotics, you have sensors, and you have AI, and that mix is creating completely new industries. And I think like that's why it's so appealing. You can be a hardware expert, you can be a biotech background, you can do whatever it is, but you can still participate in this new revolution, which I think is like, it's so compelling for investors, it's compelling. What we haven't told is, like, we haven't told a lot of the founders, like, they can really move mountains with much more simple things. They don't have to spend billions on like a traditional industry. They can move significant by just an idea, right? And that's really like, that's the magic of what we do in venture. Sometimes we get to a moment like this.
Yeah.
I was just noticing I'm the only one without cool sneakers, so if you'll listen. Biotech, and I'm using that term broadly, is, although not industrial, is very much a trendy industry, which you wouldn't think. I mean, we're doing things with cells, and we're doing things with AI, and so on. But what's trendy today may not be tomorrow. So yes, synthetic biology, as an example, is very trendy, but nobody's made money out of it. At least nobody who goes to the synthetic biology conference I speak at every year has made money. So maybe you have a different example?
I guess Novo has made a little bit of GLP, like just, they reformed it.
Synbio, right? Yeah. Pure percent. Anyway, yeah. So the idea is something looks really wonderful on the surface, and it is for a while, and then everyone jumps in and tries to do it, but there may not be the underlying trend that's going to make it sustainable, and it will be in, and everyone will invest, and then it'll go down. I just saw today that Bluebird Bio, which is a gene therapy company, had a valuation in billions of dollars at one point, and it just sold its assets for $30 million.
Yeah.
They had the most expensive.
That's what venture specializes in, right? It is pump up the value. No, but with respect, I think there's a lot of proven points in that where biology is going right now is going to build very large businesses.
Yeah.
And they're sustainable. But I agree with you, like if you look 2 or 3 years back and you saw some of the early stage we're going to heal and save the world, like you can't do that unless you build a business, a sustainable, sound business, right? So if, like every time I take a look at a deal, I want to understand like what is the commercial underlying assumption of this, right? It's not rocket science again. Yeah. It's like, can you build a business or can't you? And I love that if you can save the world. That's the impact we want to do, all of us want to do. But we're not going to save the world unless we have a really healthy financial background to do that, right? And like, so every time you see something go up and trillions and billions, if there's no real foundation behind it, it's going to disappear again. That's like...
I have 2 things to say. So the first one, we have some interesting data from our global challenge. So to give you a bit of the context, we get 4,000 applications from early stage deep tech startups every single year. That is a wealth of information that we use at Hello Tomorrow. One of the interesting trends that we're seeing is that we're seeing an increase in advanced simulation. And what I mean by that is it's sector agnostic, anything from molecular design, anything, and it's affecting including the energy sector, pharma sector, everywhere. And I think this is here to stay. But also an interesting thing that we're seeing in the data is within that pool of advanced simulation startups, it's only 40% that is powered by AI. So that's 60%, which is not AI. So that's to address one point. And I do think that trend will be here to stay, at least for the next 5 to 10 years. 100% agree that with all investments of all technology, there are cycles. no one's disagreeing on that point. But I'd also like to tease apart, you were mentioning, previously there was this massive boom for certain technologies. It's sort of declining now. The valuations for certain companies are going down. I'd love to hear what are the most common pitfalls startups face when scaling. And in my head, I am thinking of a couple of examples, and I wonder if we can name them. But for instance, Ginkgo Bioworks were doing incredibly well. I think they were riding the wave in 2020 and also 2021. And since then, their stocks have been plummeting in terms of, I don't have to tell you guys what's been happening. I'd like to know what your thoughts are about the pitfalls that they have when scaling. Did they scale too soon, too far? And what are the opportunities that we can learn from this?
Sure, I'll start. Ginkgo Bioworks, without double-clicking on what happened there, is probably also one of the, do you run too fast to the end line? Do you want to go public? Are you ready for that? Is your technology that mature? Did you build that plan out? And I'm not taking in assumptions whether they did that or not. But I think it's fair to assume that there were a stage where we did SPACs, everyone did SPACs and SPVs and whatever else. And that wasn't very smart. It was great for the ones that figured out how to exit it, but for most, and especially for founders, it didn't help them, right? Not a moment of it, right? I think that's where, that has to be, again, the starting point. How do we help them around this kind of table? How do we, for each of the founders, help them, it's great to be greedy, it's great to run for it, but also you may hit a wall, and how do we manage that, right? So for many of the fast-growing companies, what they're going to experience in biotech, in my view, is they're going to have an abrupt jump from venture, which is going to be fancy PowerPoints and fun talks and whatever else, into a really boring world. And how do you go from that, right? You may have to change management. You may have to think as a founder, well, that's not really my forte. I need to find someone else to step in. But again, it goes for any business, any company. Look at the time you're in, look at where you fit best, and stay there. Or find someone who can help you move on. So I'm not sure whether that responded to you.
I'll jump off from where you are, which is, the SPACs, I remember that era when everything was so exciting and people were raising all money, but we all knew that it was fake. And we knew that there was not a lot of reality underneath these huge deals that were being done. And it was being driven by Wall Street bankers who could make great fees over doing this. And it looked like it was giving companies some exits or some liquidity. Unfortunately, that didn't work for almost all of them. And so you just have to be careful when these trends hit to see what's real. And at the bottom, it's always about the economics and the business. And that's what we continually miss, is something is exciting, there's hype, but what's real and what will be sustainable when the hype goes away. So, unfortunately, we see it again and again. Like Ginkgo was down at $1 the last time I checked, and it was, it was a huge success. And I actually know one of the founders who was in tech before this, and foresaw where tech bio was going to go together. And so he was the great visionary, but someplace along the way, the vision got corroded and it ended up valueless. So I guess the lesson is focus on what's real and don't get taken away by the hype.
But do you think, I'll respectfully disagree, because I think a lot of the valueness you're mentioning is surely someone pumped it up, and whether that was bankers or someone else, who knows. But I think a lot of the companies that I looked at and were part of had real valuables and are still really valuable, have deep science, have a lot of things. They just got ahead of themselves. I think that's the difference. Obviously you had fake companies that, built a story that wasn't real, but that's not the problem. It's just there's going to be fraud out there. But I would say 80% of all the companies I've seen have had deep technology, knowledge, strong value, but just kind of went ahead of themselves.
Yeah, I will also jump into this good discussion, and actually I agree that there was, a very strange time where, everybody were driving forwards the IPO, and definitely too early. But I think the core problem there was that, and still is they don't understand, the biotech, business model. Who is like building the product, who is doing the science, who is doing the, scale-up production, and who is doing the sales. Because like if you look, from pharma side, pharma is not doing any innovation. They are not doing any, this, base level preclinical stuff. They are only these days after, stellar, early stage startups who have like stellar new technologies validated in best universities, have demonstrated early signs of success. And then they have these strategic partnerships that were actually discussed last session here yesterday. And then you actually build this partnership, and then the big pharma takes your product, runs or finances the phase 2, phase 3, and if you have not just one product, but you have a platform to kind of enable similar innovative products, that's when you are bought, not with 1 billion or 7 billion, but if you have a really, really strong platform, you are bought by 27 billion or 57 billion, and without actually need to go public. And it's, as you Christian said, it's the product has to be there, the science needs to be there, and not going for the hype. So it's understanding how the specific industry works we are doing to try your innovation. That's, I think, it's the key, and it's also like building the strengths, like here in Europe or small countries like Denmark, Estonia. We really need to build our products based on our local strengths. In Estonia, it's the digital and all this stuff. In Denmark, it's mostly the building on Novo's success. And
what do you mean small? Come on, like.
Yeah, we are bigger.
Yeah, like with big confidence. No, listen. One of the things that frustrates me when I walk around here is this stupid term TRL, right? It's so stupid. Like, who cares? Technology readiness level. It should be scale level, like scale readiness level. That's what it is about, right? Surely you can't launch something if you don't have the technology. But like, if you can't scale it, we don't care. No one cares. So I vote and hope you all remember to change that when I walk around. Like, instead of technology readiness, like just have scalability readiness, because that's going to define your ability to finance the company.
We don't use the term TRL.
Good.
So if we take it back, if we sort of summarize we go back to the basics, essentially, have a great technology, have a great product, speak to people, get as much information and advice as you can, and really understand the market, but ultimately understand the business. Who's going to be doing the business in your company? Do you need to get someone in from external help? Now we're going on to the Q&A section. We do have 2 people with mics at the front, so if you raise your hands up very, very high if you have questions, so we can see you. Oh, I see that. Where are the mics? Okay, our mic lady is coming. Thank you so much.
My name is Lilian Carret from Brazil. I work in a state agency that finance startups, deep tech startups, and I'd like to ask for Christian, in which stage of the readiness level of a biotech it should be for you to write the first check, and what about, or if you encourage your biotechs to access grants in your funding or opportunities that you see?
Good question. So for us as a firm, or just stage-wise, you're thinking?
You as a firm.
Okay, yeah, sure. So we do early stage. So we do seed and A round, But like, I did a seed that was valued at 120 million, and I did an A round that was 40 million. I don't know. I don't understand like the numbers. What that is about. So we typically do $5 to $10 million checks. That's our average. Listen, what I'm going to advise any founder of, there are different ways of soft income, right? There's venture debt, there's NIE, and there's grants. Like those are obvious, and then obviously you can have your equity financing as well. If we set aside the equity part, don't do debt. Don't. Unless you have a clear path to cash flow, who's going to finance it for you? So avoid that at all costs, and I apologize for anyone in debt right now, but it's not good for a very early stage company to go into. Grants are great, grants are helpful. Grants have the weakness of sometimes setting you back and forcing you into a direction that you don't really need, right? And grants sometimes keep you a little bit too close to academia than you want. Not saying it does, and several of my companies have received great grants, but I think the best grants are where it's a combination of commercial, like maybe some corporates that have been involved, and then public grants. I think those are great. And then finally NRE, which is typically what you get paid by a corporate, someone else to help you develop something for them. I love it. It's easy money. All corporates have a fund for it. It's also terrifying because it kind of makes you believe that you're worth something that you're not. And NRE payments are very often just like a kindergarten, a play garden for the large companies. Here's a little bit of money, try to go in that direction. So for me, NRE has to be really, really, really product driven, and it has to be with a goal to get an output. I hope that answered your question.
And just to add, maybe a little bit earlier on the phase is like where the investors put money in an academic setup is like where there is a team with a clear understanding of the product, of the business, and what is need to be done from the business side and product side to get the first customers in and money in and agreement in. So I think that's the key. And the problem mostly in academic setting is that they're too much focused on science, too much building their own factories and spending money unwisely. That's the key problem that should be avoided.
Yeah, we see a lot between the startups that we work with, we see a clear distinction between the academics who turn into entrepreneurs versus the ones who have actually onboarded someone with a business mindset. The ones who believe in their technology, fantastic. However, they tend to, how does one say, lack a lot of the commercial understanding and the business understanding to really how to grow a business, to how to build successful venture. And this is one of the things that we see between a good versus a very, very good startup is someone who has both the tech edge as well as the business edge.
I just want to mention in that context that we have a global online class for life science, healthcare, entrepreneurship, and it's taught by Silicon Valley practitioners who take you through all the major topics that you need to know to build your business in this field. So it's very specific to this field, and it's purely practical, and it's got big lectures in small groups and so on. So if we've had people from 40 countries come to it, I would be happy to talk to anyone who might be interested to help you not make those mistakes.
I'm in the business of, I have a deep, long love story for nerds, right? Like that's what I have to find. What I realize is nerds can change the world, like they are magical. What they have learned is they developed a very strong muscle, and sometimes they forgot the fact that fundraising is also a muscle they have to develop. And what I look at when I look at founders that I meet is, can you fundraise? I'm convinced you can reinvent, improve the whatever product you're building. But if you can't fundraise, I'm terrified. So for all founders, make sure you start to practice that fundraising skill and develop that muscle. It is a muscle, it's like anything else. If you do it 1,000 times, you're going to be better at it than if you don't. And I think a lot of founders underestimate this, right? They say, well, I'm the best in this strain and no one else have done this. I've done this for 20 years. Great, fantastic. Stay in academia then. Like if you want to build a business, understand each of the element of what you're building.
I think that's a fantastic advice. In the interest of timing, we'll unfortunately have to wrap up, but I would like the audience to thank our incredible panel for today's discussion, and if they would like to contact you later to have discussion.